After years of challenges by environmentalist groups, the Capitol Annex project is finally underway. Now what that means for you is that when visiting the Capitol, you may want to give yourself a few extra minutes to get through all this construction. After showing up to the state capitol week after week demanding lawmakers do more to hold drug dealers accountable, parents who lost their child to fentanyl are now going to the ballot to let the voters decide. Farm workers have been stationed outside the Capitol for weeks in support of AB 2183. This bill would expand voting options for union workers to create safer elections. Farm workers believe this will help eliminate previously used intimidation tactics during union elections. In this replica of a solitary confinement cell, you can see just how small it is, with a bed, a shelf, and a toilet. Like being at war, 24/7. This is how Richard Johnson describes being in solitary confinement.
They had something that belonged to me. They wanted my mind. They wanted my heart. They wanted my spirit. They wanted my everything. They wanted my being. I'm not submitting it. I'm not giving it up.
Johnson says he spent over 20 years in solitary, locked in a cramped cell designed to break your spirit. What kept the 71-year-old going was discovering a passion for writing.
Solitary confinement is not to so much punish you, it's to torture you.
Since being released in 2021, Johnson has become an advocate for people in similar situations and advocates for legislation to reform solitary confinement. He is one of the many supporters for Assembly Bill 280, which would reform the practice in California.
In California, this great state that looks to move the bar on so many important areas of life. Human justice, civil rights, human rights. That we find ourselves behind the curve on making the important changes that we need to make to how solitary confinement is used in this state.
Assembly member Chris Holden authored the bill, also known as Mandela's Law. AB 280 would ban people under the age of 26 and over the age of 60 from solitary confinement. It would also limit the time people could spend in solitary confinement to no more than 15 consecutive days.
We hope that by mirroring it after international standards that are designed to say no more with torture, no more with solitary confinement that lines up with torture, the change happens now.
But not everyone in the legislature is on board with change, as the Republicans have opposed the measure. Assemblymember Tom Lackey, a former CHP officer, says the bill would do more harm than good in prisons.
Many of these people that are in prison that this policy impacts are very problematic people. They're very violent, they're very visceral, and they've proven they don't care about others' well-being at all.
As for Johnson, he says being free gives him the chance to clear up misconceptions about the practice.
But torture, being locked in the toilet for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know, treating like a wild animal or something. Every time you come out, you handcuffed.
Mandela's Law will be voted on for the third time in the Senate next week. It is expected to pass and head to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk. High school can be a difficult time for a lot of teens, but for Jenna McKay, her experience was even more challenging.
Met the man that would be my trafficker in high school. He graduated a year before me, and he lured me out with false promises, and I was sold right there in my community.
Jenna says it took 6 years for people to realize she was being trafficked. Now, as an adult, the 35-year-old started the Jenna McKay Foundation to help train first responders and law enforcement on the signs to look for when people are being trafficked.
A lot of trafficking victims will have a branding, which is a tattoo that their trafficker puts on them to take ownership of them. Sometimes it's not visible, but sometimes it is on their neck or above their eyebrow.
As a survivor, Jenna spends a lot of her time sharing her story and advocating for bills like Senate Bill 14 by Senator Shannon Grove. SB 14 will update a state law to make human trafficking a serious felony, something Senator Grove has been attempting to change for a long time.
Staff and I will never unsee the things that we saw researching this bill. I mean, women are branded, like by a cattle brand, branded, beaten, broken bones, starved, not allowed to eat. We had one lady tell us that you know, she had to perform 25, she called it tricks, every single night. You know, roughly 365 days a year, she wouldn't get to eat or sleep, and it's pretty brutal.
While human trafficking is a major problem in other countries, Senator Grove
notes many Californians aren't aware how big of an issue it is in our own backyard. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, there were about 2,000 victims identified in 2021.
It absolutely is here in California. It's the #1 trafficked state in the nation. People think it's a third world country that this happens to, but it's happening right here in your own backyard in California.
If signed into law, SB 14 will increase prison times for traffickers. Grove attempted to pass a similar bill last year, but it died in the Senate Public Safety Committee. This year, it made it out of the tough committee, but she had to amend the measure to only punish those who traffic minors, which Jenna called a bittersweet victory.
It just shows how much more work we have to do, is that they amended it for only those that traffic children, which, you know, for me, I 100% agree. It's a violent crime against children. No child should be sold for sex or labor. But it should be for victims of all ages.
Still, she thinks it's a good first step towards change and hopes to see SB 14 signed into law later this year.